about this, and I want to go for help, who can talk the most intelligently about this. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves and just throw out, after you say who you are, what the first thing in games that scared you was. We'll start with this guy right here.
Hey, I'm Chateauneuf. I'm editor-in-chief of Destructo.com. The first thing in games that scared me was I hate the Resident Evil dog that jumped out of the window. I'm a dog lover, but I hate that dog.
Hi, I'm Turi from Game Informer. The first thing that ever scared me in a game was when I got to Labyrinth Zone in Sonic the Hedgehog 1, and I realized that Sonic can drown to death. And I play basically Jaws music as my favorite childhood mascot slowly drowns to death. I get to reset it. So that was the first thing that scared me.
My name is Kollar. I'm a reviews editor at Polygon. I think the first experience that I can remember being scared in a video game goes back to this obscure NES game that I love a whole lot called Monster Party. You are walking through the first level of this game, and it's just like a idyllic, like green plain. There's like really normal-looking monsters that you're fighting, and then suddenly it changes into like this horrible nightmare zone where you're walking on bones and there's blood dripping off of everything. I remember I played it as like a 4 or 5-year-old being terrified.
That's some good parenting.
Hi, my name is Chateauneuf. I'm the co-founder of Red Barrels and also the game designer of Outlast. And what scares me the most is really when I was young. I was playing out in the dark. It was the first time that they tried to do like 3D games, and I think the first time they find a shotgun and there's like that 3D polygonal zombie like going towards you, like and you shoot, and it wasn't 3D precise, so that really scared me the hell out of me.
Hi, my name is Susan Arendt. I'm managing editor of Joystiq, and it's not the first thing that scared me in a game, but it's the one that I go back to as probably being the most important, was the radio in the original Silent Hill. Because you pick it up and it says it's broken, and so your immediate thought is, well, clearly at some point I'm going to find batteries, and then I'll fix it, and then help will come, and it's great. And you just stick it in your pocket, you forget about it because it's an adventure game item, and then that static. And then you're like, whoa, this seems strong. Oh my God, what's going on? You left a mark on you.
So, speaking of Silent Hill, let's sort of start off by talking about what do you feel, we'll start with Susan, what do you feel are the most influential horror games on the genre as a whole? Like, where is the,
Well, if Silent Hill is a nice place to start because that is a combination of less is more. One of the reasons why Silent Hill was so terrifying was what you didn't see, what didn't happen. And it made really, really brilliant use of sound. And a lot of the reasons it did this were technical limitations on the PlayStation. The whole reason for the fog is it couldn't draw the rest of the town for it. So you ended up being trapped in this kind of mysterious fog, which leads to the radio, which leads to mysterious shapes coming out of the fog. That's a really wonderful chain of events. But also its attention to sound, for similar reasons. When you're exploring, say, the hospital or the school, you'll be in one room and you'll hear something happen in the room next to you. And then all of a sudden it's, is it going to come out of there? Do I have to go in? And then you steel yourself and you go in the room. Now mind you, the game has done nothing except play a sound. And all of a sudden you've got all these different possibilities going through your head, and if you choose to go into that room and then find out who's there, it's a really, really brilliant manipulation of your fear and the environment by doing nothing other than playing a piece of glass breaking. So Silent Hill really emphasized that you don't constantly need to be overwhelming the player with blood and guts, with scary music, with all this, stimuli. A little thing can really go a long way if you give the appropriate atmosphere to grow.
Sort of building off of what Susan said, I feel like the games that are really defining the genre now are games where, because the technical limitations that just kind of disappeared for the most part, right? Like, people who are making games can more or less make whatever they want work, to some degree at least. So you see the horror games that have a huge budget, like the Resident Evils, are becoming more and more like action games. The stuff that's limited by budget, the stuff that's limited by team size, I think, where they have to like work with a smaller amount of resources, like for example, like Amnesia. I think that stuff is really defining the horror space today.
I know you two have stuff to say.
Oh yeah, Resident Evil. Like the very first Resident Evil, because it did some of the things I think that that Susan was talking about, but it was also introduced that sort of that ammunition and health was this finite resource, and you had to ration it, and you did this really great job of making you feel like you get the shotgun and you're like, hell yes, like now I can use all these shotgun shells, it's gonna be okay. And then you start fighting hunters, and they come into the mansion and they can decapitate you in one swipe. And so it did this really good job of starting out weak and then empowering you a little bit, and then shutting you back down and building you back up, and then you finally get the magnum and you're like, oh, it's gonna be okay. And then you fight the tyrants and it's terrible. I really feel like Resident Evil kind of is super important for that reason.
It doesn't get as much love, but the Fatal Frame franchise.
Yeah!
Now there's some current games that use the mechanic that you can't fight. You run or you pray or you shut the game off like I did one time. But no, it's there was just this way of like Susan was saying with the technical limitations at the time. That was also in place for the Fatal Frame. Maybe not as much, but they wanted you to just be scared at any moment. And there's a lot of neat things. They also did the sound. Sometimes just a single cue and you couldn't replicate it. So you would be standing in one very particular place in the game, say Fatal Frame 2, and you hear one noise. And that's not a recurring noise. They program it just so you would only hear that once. And to be sure, you would go back and you wouldn't hear it again. And then you're like, is there something in this room? So yeah, I think a lot of people think about Fatal Frame, even in the back of their heads when some of this new stuff comes up. And I hope the franchise continues.
I agree with those guys. In my experience, and what's really defines well the genre right now, and you can see the Amnesia with all the sanity level going kind of freaky. And I remember pretty well Eternal Darkness. That game was so, I thought it was nuts. I was like, I was playing, and everything is good. You're playing, and you think you're really going forwards, but actually you're just imagining things. And they kind of try to use that for the gameplay, but at some point you don't know what shit quite well, though there was like some things that you could use so your sanity was not that bad. But that is something that playing with the human brain right now is really something that is pretty cool. And I could say that even in Outlast, so that's what we're trying to do, some kind of thing like that. Not trying to scare you, but like letting you scare yourself by what you think you've seen. So
The player's brain is always going to work better at scaring them than anything, and no matter how good the developer is, no matter how good the game is, you're better at scaring yourself than anybody else.
For sure.
So leaving those gaps in there, those blanks that leaving the space for you to fill in your worst nightmare is a really, really powerful tool that games are now starting to figure out they can do.
So not to cut in, but on that, did any of you marathon any survival horror games? Like just to sit down and some people, you have to. It's hard now these days because the games are so long. But take the second or third Silent Hill, maybe the second Fatal Frame. You can play this in a day. I have a friend that for every release we still do this. You sit together, you blanket all the windows, cover all the lights, make sure your phones are off, make sure that no one's going to visit, that your dogs aren't going to be walked or whatever, and then you play the game straight. And the funniest thing is we're not allowed to talk to each other. We like Tim and I playing, and you want to say something or you can scream, but you can't do anything else. You want to say something, but all you do is just kind of look at each other. asylum at first, you're really uneasy. And now you're just kind of silently sharing this experience with one person in the dark, surrounding someone. And then you scare yourself. And if you haven't tried that, I recommend that, especially with some of these older games that are 7 or 8 hours long.
It brings up a really interesting point. Tim, you were talking about games that sort of like power you up and then shut you down. And some of the most terrifying games, I'm thinking of Slender, you avoid combat altogether, you're just running. And then you have games like Zombie and Dying Light where the emphasis is on slapping these zombies around and taking them down. So in a game where you can fight back, do you think that, how does that affect the way that you feel and the terror that you feel as opposed to a game where you can't fight back?
Yeah, that sense of helplessness is like, I don't know. For me, I guess one of the first ways I experienced that was trying to do like a minimalist, like knife-only run in like the original Resident Evils, and it changes everything because it restricts how you can interact with that world, and you end up evading a lot. And evading in the early Resident Evils, and Silent Hill and stuff, you could run away on the streets from you could get stabbed in the opposite direction, and that would save you ammo, and you could also avoid this terrifying encounter. And then now we're seeing it more in games like Outlast or Amnesia or Among the Sleep is a really good looking one that's on the way. And I think that it's effective, and I like the Silent Hill Shattered Memories. That was the other one that tried to.
I love that game. No one else did.
The Wii version maybe wasn't the strongest version. It was definitely cool, but I think that it's definitely essentially more terrifying to be stripped down of all your weapons. Dead Space 3, I think I really like Dead Space 3 as both like a horror, as a horror-themed action game. And I think that at a certain point, like if you knew how to manage your weapons well, because you could make your own weapons, like you would just steamroll the entire game. That's not too scary at a certain point, but it's something I really like, and it's a trend I want to see continue, the non-combat horror. But I'd like to see maybe just a little bit more of ways to fight back kind of get implemented in like really responsible ways.
Yeah, and I can add something with that. As a game developer, we saw it, and I was talking to Thomas from Fictional Games, like we were talking, and it was some radio show, I know. And again, we were talking about that a little bit, like, all the weapons and what's wrong with them, and pretty much everything about that. And we were just realized that when you give a weapon to a player, like he's so used to use it to move forward and attack. So there's no way we can tell him, like, here's a weapon, but don't think about fighting. So because we want to let the player do whatever he wants with it. And what Thomas said, he kind of realized it when in Penumbra, there was a gameplay with the hammer where you can get rid of some wood planks. And during the playtest, he said like people were trying to bash dogs with a freaking hammer. Yeah. So it was like, damn, there's no way. Like, it's a hammer, it's not a weapon. And you know it's useful for getting rid of the wood plank, but players want to hit things. So, well, it should be part of our nature, I don't know. But yeah, so Outlast and Amnesia, like, I think that's the approach that we decided to take. It's like, okay, well, let's just find a setup that the player won't have a weapon, so it's gonna understand that it's about surviving. Surviving is not just trying to shoot every zombie that you encounter, it's mostly trying to, get 3 bullets, let's say, and then it's like 1 zombie, 2 zombies, and killing maybe the last bullet for your brain. In case something happens. So that's pretty much like how weapons are right now in games. Like, so it's either action and it's fully good, you go and you kill all of them, or you, like in my opinion, like it's really more strong if you don't have them and you have to run away.
The game I thought that maintained a really a good sense of dread and a really good atmosphere while also handling the combat situation really well was Condemned. Because you would find a revolver and maybe 2 bullets, and you could only carry one thing at a time. And whatever you left behind, somebody behind you could pick up and use against you. So you can't collect everything, and you have to start making choices about, well, do I bring this shotgun with its 1 bullet in it, or do I just fire it against the wall and drop it because then it's slightly less effective against me if somebody comes up behind me. And the balance and the constant thinking of, well, and weapons wore out as well. So even if you found a really good sturdy pipe or something, it was going to break eventually. So you might want to trade it for something, for a 2x4 that's a little less powerful, but it'll get you just that little bit further. And I thought that was a nice compromise between letting you engage with the things that are trying to get you, while also leaving you vulnerable and still trying to make decisions about how best to survive and get that little bit further towards your goal.
I've been calling those games resource work. I'm trying to coin a term. I don't know if you guys dig it over, but it's one of those things where you're so reliant on what you can find or what you have. And I like those. I can't say that, I love Condemned, but I can't say that I enjoy these games near as much as a game where I guess the core of the horror is supernatural. Like you have no control. It's less about, say, Fiddle or what was it, Shattered Memories, where I don't know if you guys play that, you have to run. And you can look back every once in a while to see what's coming after you, but you have to dodge, figure eight, or whatever. Nothing you find is going to help you. And it's less about resources and more about the thing that's getting you is supernatural, something you can't kill anyway. That to me was way scarier than the scariest type of game. It's like a horror movie. If there's a guy with a knife and a mask, you could probably kill him. And to me, it's not that scary. But if you've been on an Indian merry-go-round and the spirits are coming up and eating your face and that, I'd say that's a bit scarier.
David was talking about, you mentioned Outlast, which is the game you're working on. And sort of a question for you, we'll start with you. There seems to be a lot of, the indie community seems to be really adopting the genre full force. You have Outlast and Among the Sleep and Darkwood and everything. So what about the survival horror genre is appealing to an indie developer?
Well, the thing is, 2 years ago, we were kind of looking at some forum, and they were always wondering where those games are, where we can get scared. And there was those old Resident Evil game. So on our side, where we wanted to do an horror game, personally, I wanted to do an horror movie since I'm young. And I ended up in the video game industry, and I was even at 3D stuff, I was we should do an horror games. And it's when I quit those jobs that I decided, okay, let's go and start that. So I think there's really a niche there. Because the thing is, with the big company that do big AAA title, the thing is, for them, and I don't blame them, it's just that they want the most money possible. And people that like to get scared, well, we're kind of a little bit of crazy something. So we're not the 80% of the population that go there at the shop and buys the games. And the thing is, there's really a niche for losing some time. I got my French, so.
You speak plastic in French, we can do that for you. We'll have subtitles running across it.
French is a very terrifying language.
No, but yeah, so we decided to take that approach of going to all-in survival horrors because there's not much company that does that now. I think all those indie companies are really willing to try something different and new approaches. So for us, it was obvious. I was the horror freak, and Hugo Dallaire was the artistic director of the first Splinter Cell. He knew how to do light and shadow, and Philippe Laurent was the other co-founder, who knew pretty much all the movies and stories. So we're okay, horror, lights, shadow, and movies, and let's do it. And we knew that there was some people that would be willing to go there and buy those things. So that's pretty much how I see it. And I think it's just going to grow over and over. And probably even the AAA company are going to steal those games to make it profitable.
Phil, you gave me the eyes.
That was a mistake. horror movies, it's kind of gotten to the point where, again, like looking at the budget thing, really big budget horror movies usually don't do well anymore. They don't perform well enough, so studios just aren't really making them. The stuff that's doing really well is when an indie studio comes along and does like a Paranormal Activity that they made for like on a shoestring budget, and then millions and millions of people go out to see it. And you're seeing something similar with like Slender and Amnesia, where they're these really tiny games made on a really small budget, and suddenly they blow up, and there are millions of people playing them on YouTube with scary games.
Speaking of films, do you guys think that survival horror games have informed mainstream media in any way, or vice versa?
I wish. I don't think so, and I wish it would happen more. And sometimes I think I see hints of it because I want that to happen so badly, and I love so many of these survival horror games that, these movies are falling flat. What's the latest one? The Conjurer. Did you see that? Conjuring, yeah, whatever.
It's not good. It was super disappointing.
Yeah.
Super like
They could have taken some.
Don't go see it, guys.
I was going to see it, and then when you see it, think about how some survival horror cues would be better. It wasn't like,
If there is stuff going on with games informing movies, it's hard to see it. Like looking past, was it Silent Hill? Was it Revelations?
Oh God.
Aside from actually, incidentally, the Max Payne movie, I think it's the worst movie that I've paid to see in a long time. So it's super hard to look past that and see how games can be doing anything good for movies.
What do you guys think?
Unfortunately, the best horror is simple. It's something you can explain in just 5 words, And the best horror movies, in my opinion, are also simple. The idea is simple. The threat is simple, and then it extrapolates from there. One of my favorite horror movies that I've seen recently is Frozen. Not the Frozen, because that sucks, but Frozen. It's about 3 friends who get stuck on a chairlift at a ski resort, and they're stuck there for a week. Very, very simple idea. You're stuck up on a chairlift, you're 40 feet up in the air, it's freezing, no one's coming, now what? Right? Very, very, very simple premise, very easy to understand the threat. And games can communicate that simple, especially indie games, it's very easy, can get that very simple idea and create that horror fun. And Slender is a fantastic example of that. Really, really simple idea. Scary effing dude coming after you, run, right? Unfortunately, most movies, studios are convinced they need to cram in as much as possible because they think you're dumb. And they cannot hold your attention unless they keep shoving all this stuff in your face. And that doesn't really work really well for horror. Games understand that you don't have to do that. But sadly, that has not, because the mediums are too different and they're 2 different ages, I don't think there's been a lot of crossover yet. No.
I think that's really interesting. Like the whole simplicity is really good for horror, and the unfortunate thing is like simplicity and minimalism. Like it doesn't really sell that well. You can't really market that well.
Yeah.
Especially if it's like a AAA game. And then the other part of that is you look at other AAA games, and we're spending most of like M-rated games blasting people's faces off anyway. Even if it's not supposed to be terrifying, it's bloody and awful, and it's a reward. Like gore is this reward for doom-free. I guess I wasn't scared by it, but if you shoot a guy in his head, his brain falls off. Like you see his brain fall off, and I'm just like, oh, this is awesome. But that's not.
Am I bad for laughing? That's not that bad.
It's super good. But the thing is like that's not scary. So I think when games scale back from gore, you can kind of get this perspective and this sort of it grounds the experience again, because like violence is the language of most video games, and it's not shocking. I think what I love is this isn't. I don't think this is a big BioShock Infinite spoiler, but there's like they wait. There's like the BioShock games are violent, but BioShock Infinite does a good job of waiting to give you like this intro into violence, and it's super visceral and surprising. And I thought it was really effective because they waited to bring in violence, and when they did, it was like, oh my god, that's right, this is going to be super, super bloody, and then it's super bloody from there on in. Ty West is the director that also it's House of the Devil, and he also, he's awesome. And the first VHS, he has a short and he's a director that just like lets you think that like how bad can things get, and then it's just like this super terrible violence that happens. And I think that sort of responsible use of gore can be really effective in games too if we weren't always just overexposed to it.
Yeah.
So do you think less gore and less bloody is better, or are there any cases in which tons and buckets of blood actually work?
I mean, let me ask you, when you guys see gore, does that come off to you as scary, or you just, I feel the same way. Yeah, I mean, if gore is attached to a scary instance, that's fine, but otherwise, gore is something, you know, like Tim was saying, with the brain falling out of the head, we're desensitized to a point where anything bloody or gutsy is just shrug-worthy now.
It really depends on how it's being presented, because I agree that just fountains of blood have really, like, I consider the Final Destination movies comedies at this point. Like there's one particular death in one Final Destination where someone's squashed by a pane of glass. Yeah. My favorite death. I got that shit on slow-mo, man. By the frame on that, because I just think it's really funny. Whereas if you take the TV show Cannibal, which because it is on network television, is limited in the kinds of things it can show. Again, Final Destination, I'm giggling at. Something with minimal gore, just because of the way it's presented, really disturbs me. Like, I'm still thinking about scenes I've seen on that show days and weeks after I've seen them. So gore can be effective depending on how you use it. If you're just like taking a bucket and dumping it, who cares? If you're using a paintbrush and using it to create a scene, then it can be super, super terrifying.
I think the other thing is it kind of depends on what kind of horror game it's trying to be, right? Like we're talking about horror games mostly in terms of like actual like just terrifying games, but there are also the horror games that are trying to capture like the more campy elements of horror that I think Susan's talking about. Like I would say some of where Resident Evil has gone is towards that more campy direction, or one of my favorite PS1 survival horror classics, Dino Crisis. So in those cases, like, gore can be a really important element just because it's trying to be so crazy and over the top and ridiculous.
Dead Rising comes to mind for sure.
Oh yeah. Love that.
So we talked about indies, but what about AAA? Like, it seems like the Resident Evil and the Dead Space series are sort of on the rocks, and we have Evil Within and Dying Light coming out. So what is the state of AAA survival horror games? Like, where are they? Big question.
Well, did you guys play Silent Hill 4: The Room?
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear at least a few claps. When I think about the state of AAA survival horror games, I think about how quickly that game was discounted, how quickly it hit the discount bins, and how much used copies were sold in the stores. It's still one of my favorite survival horror games of all time. You know, like, I'm so happy to hear this. But what happened there, you know, that is a fantastic game. And it hits a lot of these marks that we've been talking about. So there's not a lot of gore. It plays with your mind. You're stuck in this one room. You wake up and you see the ceiling fan spinning every day, just as you would in your life. It's just beautifully crafted survival.
Okay, I have a question for you on that point though.
Okay.
Because huge Silent Hill fan, loved 1, 2, 3, was super stuck for 4. Felt like, and I had similar feelings about 3, but I thought that 4 was going back to the same well that Silent Hill kept going to. And you can't scare a person the same way twice. The parts in the room I found terrifying. But as soon as he left the room to go explore the other areas, I felt like I was playing through Silent Hill stuff that I had already played through.
You were, and part of that was, I don't know if you know, Corriea is the guy that does all the amazing music for the Silent Hill games. He was allowed to produce the 4th game. So that's what happens when you become a musician. But this is what happens when you let a musician make a video game. There's a lot of cool ideas, a lot of rock star stuff, and then like, oh, I don't know what else to do. Let's just do the Silent Hill stuff. But if you can get over that game is fantastic.
And I think that points to one of the issues with AAA survival horror games in general. AAA game design, they want to make franchises. They don't want to make a one-off game. And So when you start getting to like, you know, the 5th, 6th, 7th game in the series, you're inevitably going to be retreading ground, or you're going to be going in really weird directions. And you know, you see that in movies as well. But it's something that I think makes it difficult for AAA survival horror to be a thing that lasts. Hopefully, the evil within is good and can pull that off.
Yeah, I think also.
I think Susan is excited for the evil within. No.
Okay, the issue that I have with what I have seen of the evil within so far, which, to be fair, is a small part. That's from Silent Hill, that's from Resident Evil, oh, I remember that from a different, oh, that's from Condemned. It borrows so fully imagery and settings and actions from other games that I've already played. It. So, but one section, so I certainly cannot speak to the entire game.
I think it's going to end up, I mean, this is my opinion, but I think it's going to end up being like, it's going to have a lot of horror tropes, but I think it's going to do them really well and like over the top. It's going to be like Resident Evil 4 where like it kind of left off, I think. I mean, that's my opinion. It could be fun for them, but I don't think it's going to like do anything too innovative.
I think we also have to differentiate games that scare us and horror games. Because, you know, Dead Space is a horror-themed action game. It's not scary.
No.
You know? But it is very definitely dipped in horror games. So, and that's okay. And I don't think all horror games have to necessarily scare you. So I think it'll be a very fun horror game. I don't think it's scary.
So, are there any sort of niche or less known horror games that you guys would recommend for someone who is just getting into the genre or a veteran? Like, what games have really stood out to you that you think everyone should play?
I have to go back to the Fatal Frame thing. And I know some of you cheers, but like, I think it's a shame. If you like Resident Evil, if you like Silent Hill, if you like any of these newer games, I think it's a damn shame if you haven't at least played 2, which is still the scariest game of all time. They're a little hard to track down, but please, if you haven't played it, check them out. Not necessarily niche, but it definitely leaning towards that direction.
One indie game that I will mention that disclaimer is not out yet, so it could end up being awful. But everything that I've seen leads me to believe that it will not be. It's a game called Routine. And it looks so incredible. It's got this great like sort of VHS analog aesthetic. And they've said they're very much borrowing from like 80s horror movie feel for this game, and it looks really cool.
Another cool thing about Routine, and also that was probably going to be one of my answers, but is it's also got like procedurally generated worlds. So what's cool about it is, you know, you play Resident Evil 1 and it's like, oh, the dog jumps out the window there, or you play Silent Hill and like, oh, that weird pterodactyl thing crashes through there or something. It remixes the worlds, or it's going to, so you can see, you know, a different like moon base every time you go through it, which I think is really interesting for the horror space.
I find it's like, definitely for me it was I suggest strongly Call of Duty. That game was like so slow at the beginning, and at some point like it's the shades that start. It's in that kind of a Lovecraft kind of a mood. So Call of Duty is definitely something that if you want to get into it, those first person type game with the horror setting is definitely something that for me works pretty well.
If we're talking for a newbie, like someone who's really, really new for horror games, I'm going to go with Alan Wake. Alan Wake is, there's a very, very rich narrative there. It's a narrative that you can relate to pretty much instantly, and you don't know how scary it's going to get until it's too late. You can't run away. If, like me, you have a backyard full of pine trees, you may want to think about maybe not starting it at 11 o'clock at night. It's a thought. But no, Mr. Scratch, who's a character in that game, is one of the most terrifying characters I've ever seen in a game, period. And Taken, or your main enemy in there, the ones who can speak, are absolutely terrifying. But it's also, it's great because the combat is not so overwhelming that you're trying to do all of these elements at the same time. So it's a really good introduction to horror.
I'm going to jump on this too. It's out on the show floor if you guys haven't played it, Dying Light. It's Techland's new zombie. It's
what it should have been.
It's that. It's just so, I love you guys have played it. It's just so terrifying. The zombies, like, and there's a day-night cycle, and as you get into night, they get faster and they get more aggressive. Really terrifying. If you're really into survival horror, go check it out.
I was going to say, I think it's easy to write off Dying Light because, like, oh, it's the guys who did Dead Island doing another zombie game, so it's just another Dead Island. But, like, definitely give that game a shot. It is very.
Oh no, it's awesome.
It's different from Dead Island, and it looks great.
The original Dead Island is great. I really love it. And love that game. We'll play that game all day long. This is what I was hoping Dead Island 2 was going to be. Yeah, no, Dying Light is sick.
Speaking of sick, just a warning, if you get motion sick very easily, you might not want to give it a shot because that game made me barf. Little what? No, it was great. It was part of the experience. We're going to take some questions. There's a mic right
That game
here.
will make you barf. This game will make you pee a little bit.
Or I'll lie.
You're going to pee a little. Just plan on it.
Liquids everywhere. So we want to make sure we get all of you, so keep your questions nice and condensed. Thanks.
One of the things that you guys didn't go over that I think is important about the issue of AAA games and horror and why not, and that is the current trend of multiplayer and the need for precise, correct controls. The best horror games in my mind have been games that have not necessarily controlled very well. That level of disconnect is something that part of
Here
horror
with you on that all
That-
day.
We're high-fiving
All
virtual
day.
good. Come on. 100%.
Okay, but one Fatal Frame, like you said, doesn't have much action-y elements to it. It's still there and it's still in your face, like most first-person shooters are, but there's no instance for that being multiplayer at all.
No, you're absolutely right. A big part of the monetization plan for AAA games is multiplayer, because you can sell DLC for it. It keeps your brand in people's minds until you can do your next iteration. You're absolutely right. And horror typically does not lend itself really well to multiplayer, and so that is going to be at odds with that. You're not wrong.
All right, cool.
Hi.
What's your take on the recent trend, I think in TVN games like Walking Dead and The Last of Us, that kind of talk about apocalypse a while after it happened, and actually the scary enemy becomes people rather than zombies, because the zombies are kind of predictable, and you can, like the tickers in Last of Us, you kind of know what they're going to do, you can kind of roll, but the people aren't predictable. So the enemy and the scaries are the people and not zombies. What do you think about that trend?
To be honest, I'm just at the point where an eye roll starts, but then doesn't go through because there's still some good ideas. But I'm personally done with that. I think we've played with all that territory as much as we can. I'm ready to go back to just this is modern day. This is your regular life. Oh, and here's something terrible we didn't expect. Let's be better.
My biggest issue with that is just that in a lot of cases, not always, but in a lot of cases, those games, like in The Last of Us, kind of come down to, humans are the worst enemy, and that means you're just gonna shoot a lot of dudes. Like there's so many other games where I can shoot a lot of dudes. In a horror game, I would love to do something different than that.
I think we're like in some really interesting spaces for that. The Last of Us did it amazingly well, but like DayZ has the interesting sort of emergent player versus player stuff within a world of zombies, and I think that right now that means like a lot of new people just get griefed over and over again, which sucks. But I think with some finessing, that player versus player experience within a world that's post-apocalyptic, like actual like multiplayer, like John was talking about before, I think there's potential there. We're just not quite there yet.
I think Phil raises a really good point, though. You're going to end up shooting dudes. If the game is really well done, like in The Last of Us, when you get to a certain point, and it's during Ellie's part, People who play, I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about. And it's the hell is other people part. Yeah, you end up just shooting dudes, but you want to shoot the fuck out of this. But Phil's absolutely right. It has to be done well. Otherwise, you're just like, oh, now they're okay. So I'm shooting this on whatever. Bye.
Good question.
I'm interested in kind of comparing across mediums and how they translate into other mediums, specifically writing and creepypasta. I mean, the Slender Man franchise, of course, started off as a creepypasta on, I think, 4chan, actually. At least that's where I first saw it on Reddit. But
Something awful.
something awful. Okay, all right. It's the internet. No one knows where anything starts. So, Slender Man has obviously breached a couple of really awesome indie games, specifically Slender. I could not in a million years see Slender being turned into a movie.
Oh, just wait.
No, I did. All right. Maybe I should rephrase that.
They made that?
But is it good?
Yeah, it's called The Tall Man with like Jessica Biel in it.
Are you serious?
Oh, God!
Okay, maybe I should rephrase that. Slender Man being turned into a movie and have it pull off as well as like the Slender game, for example. So like, have any of you heard of the SCP series online? Full of user-generated creepy stories and absolutely terrifying, some of them. Some of them are really innocuous, some of them are downright hilarious and funny and goofy. There is an indie game, last time I played it was still in beta, through like about 6 or 9 months ago, called SCP. And they took a lot of the different articles from the SCP wiki and tried to make a game out of it. And I think one of you mentioned earlier the idea of throwing, like you, for example, I can't remember your name. You mentioned keep it simple.
Yeah.
And like the SCP game, I love reading the articles, and I like the idea of, oh my gosh, this is going to be a game now. And then I put the beta, and I'm like, oh my god, these are all being thrown at me at once, all these monsters, and it's way too much for me. And the one monster, which is the angel one, the blinking one, is the most terrifying. And then you've got these other two that are just kind of wandering around. I'm like, you guys are annoying more than terrifying. So, like,
Is there a question in here?
yeah, so I guess the whole thing is how do you see the transition across like literature to video games to movies and like all interchangeable?
Typically, I don't, because horror is in the mind, and the way you process a novel is nearly completely different than the way you process a movie, which is nearly completely different than the way you process a video game. Your actor's role in each of those is different, and the way you are consuming the imagery being created is completely different. So it takes a very deft hand to move silverly from one to the other and retain the horror.
Yeah.
It's really hard with horror.
I think there could be like inspirations between one another, but for the most part, yeah, I agree with Susan entirely. There are different strengths to different mediums, and in order for horror to work correctly, especially for horror because the genre is so difficult to make work, it needs to play to the strengths of that medium.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's why the silent film movies are good.
Slightly related to the last question that actually worked out really well. I'm curious about ways you might need to do the survival horror kind of very scary feel within a game medium that doesn't have so much like graphics such as LARP or pen and paper, where you're focusing a lot on improv and like you don't have any graphics going for you, you're very limited in what you can do. Is there a way to create very scary survival horror kind of tension and dread without relying on things like sound and fog that like might not be available?
Play Gone Home.
Okay.
I was gonna bring that up.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Because again, the player's imagination is your best friend. So if you give them just enough information that they can start making mental leaps, because we're always going to make the most awful, horrible, terrible mental leap we possibly can. Because that's what we want to do as the player. Like we want to be freaked right out. So we will take that journey with you if you just point point us in the right direction and give us a few signposts. And you do not need a lot of polygons, you don't need a lot of audio, you don't need a lot of nothing. You just have to know the journey you want them to be taking, and then give them the entire journey and then start taking stuff away. That makes sense. Thank you.
Hi, panelists. So there seems to be a lot of horror survival fans in the room, which is awesome. I'm not one of them. I don't like being scared at all. I really, really want to like being scared, and I came here hoping for some help. I love you, Susan, because A, you defended Dead Island, thank you, and B, because you were like, Alan Wake, try that. Since if you're a little lamb, then maybe that'll scare you and won't make you want to die. But I'm the kind of guy that, like, if I start playing a survival horror game, I don't like throw my controller or like freak out. I set it down calmly and I'm like, nope, this is tense. And then I walk away. So can you give me, besides quit being a huge pansy, you big fat man, can you give me any like help or tips or anything to get me into the genre, because I really want to love it a lot.
Well, if you want to be scared,
I don't want to be scared.
Then why are you playing survival horror games?
I'm not, that's the problem.
So wait, let me get straight. You want to be able to play survival horror games and be scared?
I want you to help me gain a new perspective on being scared.
Okay, then here's one. I think everyone here that plays survival horror games wants to be scared.
Okay.
So that's your perspective. You have to want to be scared.
Okay.
You have to get over that, and then you can play these games.
Okay.
It's as simple as that.
There are some people that comes and play Outlast, and they are so freaked out. So like what we told them and even them said, on that game I'm gonna play like during daylight, and I'm gonna put music on the game. So with those sound during daylight distraction, you're gonna enjoy the game and you won't be scared.
Huh. Okay.
You will.
You will.
Good luck.
Fear is an emotion that you as a human being are supposed to experience, right? It is a natural state of being. Fear is good and healthy for you. You are supposed to be afraid sometimes. We aren't most of the time because we've evolved to a point where we're safe and most of our, we don't have lions chasing us anymore. Life has for dinner. It is healthy and good for you to experience fear in a safe context. This is why we like roller coasters and stuff. So, I play out and wait, make it a very controlled environment for yourself. Like, give yourself, I'm going to play a half hour, right? Boom. Like, work yourself into it, and you will begin to appreciate the wonder, how good you feel after you've been scared, and then you come back to realizing you're safe. It's wonderful.
Turn up the brightness.
Please let us know how you do.
This is directed at all the panelists. I want to hear your opinion on co-op in survival horror games, because I think a lot of people realize that in 95% of the survival horror games where co-op is implemented, it makes the game less tense because you've always got someone watching your back. But I played a game roughly 8 years ago on the PlayStation 2. They were really underrated. They were the Resident Evil Outbreak.
Yeah. Yes.
Where you can play online with up to 4 players. And those games were actually scarier because you're running through the zoo level and you're using the reporter with lockpicks, and your teammates are telling you, quick, open that door right now, the giant freaking elephant is chasing us down, we'll try to hold him off, get that goddamn door open before we all die. And then there's other moments where like you're walking across the ledge in a hospital, and as soon as you get to the place where you think you're fine, big guy just comes and knocks you off the ledge and you're hanging, and he raises his axe to do that final blow, and your teammate just comes out of nowhere and hits him in the back with a lead pipe and knocks him off. You get so scared in that moment only to be saved at the last second, and that's the kinds of things I want horror games to do now with co-op that I really don't think they're doing. Like Resident Evil 6 had co-op on it. Yeah, not
No, I think you have a really good point. And for me, Resident Evil Outbreak was like, people talk about Journey, like the game Journey, about how it's just this anonymous sort of person, you don't know who they are, really, they come to help you out, and maybe you think they're dead, and then you're like, oh my god, is this the same person anymore? What happened to them? Like, can you even die in this game? I didn't know at first. And in Resident Evil Outbreak, I had like some of the emotions I felt playing Journey back when I played Outbreak for the first time, because you didn't have a headset, most people didn't. And the way to like communicate was like these predetermined text things. It wasn't that great, but like exactly what you said about like, you know, you get to the end, like the final countdown is going, and it's just like, oh my gosh, is anyone else alive? And then one person comes up and like, okay, we can kill the final boss together. I think it's really cool. I think the best example of that right now is if you just went back and played Left 4 Dead 2. Because, I mean, and I hope that more games start doing that. I think that, you know, take Journey and add it into horror, and I think that's kind of where we can.
I think there's one other really interesting path that co-op in horror games can take, and I'm going to mention a game that's not good, but that has good ideas, is Fear 3. The way that Fear 3 did co-op is you have one character playing as a human and one character playing as a spooky ghost. And they're working together, but they also have their own objectives that are sometimes at odds with each other. And I think there's some really interesting space that horror games could explore there, where you are working with people, but also they're kind of working against you. Tim kind of brought that up with Daisy. I think does something kind of similar to that. So there's room for co-op to work in horror games. It just needs to, they need to be more open to trying things other than just co-op shooters, basically.
I have a list of games that I want to make. If someone can help me make them. And at the top is a game where, because I agree with you, most of the co-op in these games is terrible. It just defeats the purpose of being scary. A game where, kind of like Fatal Frame, I keep coming back to it, you can't fight, but the only way to survive is if you two are near each other in proximity. Both of you continually get separated in this game because both of you are trying to figure out something. Because you have to continually run around in the dark, trying to be as close together as possible and trying to communicate the best way that you can. I think that would be scary and amazing if someone was to help me.
All right, thank you.
We have time for one more question, but if you have a question for us, we'll be outside after, so you can come and talk to us out there. So, sorry.
Games that I find that scare me the most, I guess most often, like psychological, where you mess with the player's mind. Games, I feel like a style that's not really been explored. It's been breaking the fourth wall. Games like, I guess, Eternal Darkness does it. I'm Scared. Another one that comes to mind, kind of a little bit, is Eversion, where it's kind of like, I don't know if you guys have played it. It's kind of like a happy-go-lucky platformer, and then all of a sudden your game's taken over by some dark force. But I find that those kind of games where it's like you're playing a game and all of a sudden this game comes to life, you know, it's starting to take over my computer, you know, like what's going on. I feel like it hasn't really been explored, and I think that's a really good way to scare people. It's like not just a game, but it's also like part of my computer now. Like, what do I do? Oh, what's your opinion on that? What do you think about that kind of stuff?
I think the last time I checked in with a game called Republic that was being made, which is by it's Ryan. Is that his name? The go for
Camouflage.
Yeah, Camouflage. Yeah. From what I gathered, that game was kind of like you played through the perspective of someone who was manning like security cameras, and you were trying to like guide someone out of this facility. And I think the game is supposed to like send you messages and interact with your phone, and like you're supposed to get a phone call or something. You know, I checked this game out like a couple of years ago, and I'm not sure where it's at. But if you're looking for something like that, I would check in on Republic. It's like Republic with QUE. I think it's doing stuff like that. It may not be terrifying, but it's trying to breach the fourth wall a little bit and pull you in that way, and use the other apps on your phone and stuff like that. So.
There's a game called Missing Since January. That did similar things. You would, the whole thing was there was a journalist who was missing since January, and you were trying to comb the internet for clues that might help track her down, and you would suddenly get an email from the killer, or you would get. Part of the problem with breaking the fourth wall in those kinds of ways is you have to worry about the legality of legitimately freaking out your player. Love the idea. I would love to see a game that like thank you messages over Xbox Live or something like that.
Joystiq, wasn't that the thing that was like the weird real life game where they were always, that was such a cool idea.
Yeah.
I want that again.
Yeah. So brilliant idea, really tough to pull off. Also because not everybody scares the same way.
Cool. Thanks.